All right. All right. Are we good to go, Kimberly?
You are good to go.
Awesome. Well, I would like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon or possibly catching this on a recording. And today we are going to talk about preparing for the unexpected and the role of advanced care planning for life on the road. As Kimberly mentioned, my name is Cryst'l Scheer, and I am an end-of-life doula and technically based in Williamsburg, Virginia. I have previous experience in hospice for 6 years, and before that, I was a college student and stay-at-home mom, and I have my own previous caregiving experience and volunteer experience with hospice. Uh, we are in this kind of transition phase of life where I am getting ready to spend about 6 months out of the year on the road. We are going to be living in our 33-foot Jayco that's sitting in the driveway, and it's going to be really important for me to continue to run my business while I'm out on the road. So, when I left hospice, it was with the intent to get in front of people before a medical crisis because a lot of us are experiencing end of life without preparation, without that death literacy to help us be able to make decisions when we are faced with stress. And so, as an end of life doula, I am primarily focused on education, outreach. I teach the end of life doula program through the University of Vermont. I co-chair the Virginia End of Life Doula Collective, and we support and help professional development and growth of end of life doulas in the Commonwealth. And then I work individually with clients who are looking to advance their knowledge of end of life planning, actually start to check off some of those boxes and see how they can get some things squared away. So, when we think about being on the road and advanced care planning, we're going to need a couple of definitions to help us get through. The first one is that advanced care planning is defined as a person-centered process of creating and communicating a plan for future medical care when the patient is unable to make their own decisions. This does not have to be a permanent incapacity. So, this could be a brain injury. This could be a temporary coma from an accident. And when we are thinking of the different components of advanced care planning, this is a framework of conversation. And in this framework of conversation, you are going to have conversations with your providers and your loved ones about your belief system, your values, what quality of life means to you, any past healthcare experiences you might have, any current mental and physical health conditions you have. What does your support system look like? Some of us are solo agers. Some of us are out on the road with maybe a spouse and some four-legged kids or some two-legged kids. Some of us have some really deep communities of people that we've met on the road, or maybe we're living in these like little clusters of units, right? We have like a few places that we spend our whole year. So you have friends, people that you rely on when you are in those locations. So this is a great time to just take a personal inventory of everything that you have going on now and what could be going on later, especially if you do know that you're traveling from place to place. This offers an opportunity to engage in a guided conversation that assists you in completing 4 steps needed for your advanced directive. But before we hop into that, it's good to understand that we are also setting ourselves up for success later in life when it comes to other types of advanced care planning conversations. So, in the next few minutes together, we're going to be really focused on things like the Living Will Advanced Directive as defined by the Healthcare Decisions Act, which also includes a healthcare agent in body and organ donation. But understanding the previous slide and the components of advanced care planning and what the outcomes are of this conversation are also going to help you talk to loved ones about long-term care, funeral and vigil planning, and then hospice and palliative care, as well as VSED, which is voluntary stopping of eating and drinking, and MAID, which is medical aid in dying. Um, so Although advanced care planning is birthed out of the need to create and ultimately end that conversation with a document known as an advanced directive, you get to actually use this framework to talk about all things end of life planning. So, what are the outcomes of participating in advanced care planning? So, first, we are going to reflect on all of the goals and values, your beliefs, your culture. It gives you an understanding of where you came from, where you are right now, and what your future might look like. You're having that discussion, hopefully, with your healthcare agent, the person you're going to choose to make these decisions for you, and loved ones, and possibly members of your care team. And then at the end of this conversation, you are left with that tangible document that you then get to give copies to everyone who matters. There's a lot of people you're going to give a copy to, so we can talk about that in a few minutes. These conversations are going to look a little different for people who are very nomadic. Like if you don't have an address that you would consider like your home of record, and you, let's say, are spending a year in multiple states, your advanced care plan is going to need to be a little bit more comprehensive than others. And this is already a really comprehensive process. But it's really important to know the different laws in each state if you're going to need more than one document to cover your instructions. And we'll get deeper into that in the next few slides. So this is usually where I would stop the Zoom, or I would stop in a real life room, which I haven't really done much of lately. And I'd say, who needs advanced care planning? And then hopefully somebody out there would raise their hand and say, everyone. And that is true. That is the answer. If you weren't thinking of that answer, I just gave it to you. And so just a couple of quick stats for everyone. The CDC told us in a study, or in some data that they had released a few years back, that starting in 2011 and then every year for the next 20 years, so we're in 2026, we got about 5 years left. There are 10,000 humans turning 65 years old daily in the United States. Other information that we have from Health and Human Services is that 70% of humans aged 50 to 64 years old are living with one or more chronic illness. And of that 70% of humans, 50% of them have at least two or more chronic illness. We also know from data that has been collected that millennials are 5 times more likely than boomers to live to 100 years old. And currently, there are a quarter of 50 to 65-year-olds with a chronic illness who are limited in their capacity to live independently. This does not mean that they are unable to enjoy life, that they cannot travel, that they may not, I mean, they might be living on the road, and somebody watching this might be one of these people. It just means that there is something about your activities of daily living that are inhibited after living with your chronic illness. So what this tells us is that everyone out there, regardless of your age, needs a care plan. And we need to discuss what things are going to look like and what type of health care you're going to want when you are unable to speak for yourself. So generally speaking, an advance directive is known as a legal document that directs your future health care when you become incapable of making your own decisions. And there are a lot of different types of advance directive forms. Some of them have different names and they mean the same thing. Some of them are defined very specifically in each state's Healthcare Decisions Act. So tonight this afternoon, wherever it is that you are right now, we are going to really cover things such as the Advance Directive for Healthcare, a living will, your medical power of attorney. And then we're going to talk a little bit about DNR Pulse and DDNR, which is a durable do not resuscitate. A 5 wishes document can check all of the boxes for an advance directive in most states. And if you are familiar or interested in that document, I would highly suggest comparing the everything that's included in that document to the Healthcare Decisions Act of the state that you reside in most often. Um, I have some opinions, but what I would like to focus on through Summit Care Partners, my business working with people who want to create their advanced directives, is really focusing on the Healthcare Decisions Act. The Healthcare Decisions Act loosely frames an advanced directive as a document that includes a healthcare power of attorney form, which is where you are going to designate that person to speak for you. The living will portion of this document talks about the type of care that you do and do not want, and then the designation of an anatomical gift, whether that is body donation or organ donation, and of course, always having a backup plan for that. Um, the Five Wishes document does all of those things, but it also kind of dips into memorial planning and vigil planning. And that differs from the facilitation that I do with clients because for me, those are very different conversations. They are different forms, and they're not being necessarily used throughout the entire lifespan that an advance directive could be used in. Because again, not everybody will be incapacitated and then die. Some people are just incapacitated for a short amount of time, and then we go on living with our own capacity and making our own decisions. So, before we move on, I will state that most of the direct quotes from any code that we're speaking of are going to come from the Virginia code because that's where I currently live. Although I have worked with clients in other states like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Florida, Oregon, Washington, maybe a couple of others. I can't remember right now. Um, so, Generally speaking, we're all talking about the same thing, but some of the verbiage might be a little bit different. So, for example, a healthcare power of attorney might be the name of a person, but it also might be the name of a form, and that's just going to depend on what the law is in your state. Generally speaking, an advance directive can be signed by the declarant, which is the person making it, and they will be in the presence of two subscribing witnesses. So they are specifying that they know the person who made the advance directive. They are not agreeing to what's in the document, and they are not attesting to one's capacity. That might be different in other states. Also, in all of the advanced directives that I have either read about in other states or have redone from estate planning lawyers, you only need the signature of the person making the advance directive. You don't need the signature of the person you have designated to be your healthcare agent, which is why we talk a lot about having conversations with these people because they technically don't need to be there. In most states, this does not need to be on a particular form. It does not need to be notarized, and it does not need to be written by a healthcare provider or a lawyer. You are also able to provide photocopies not only to your healthcare agent and your loved ones, but also to your healthcare providers. You can keep copies in your RV, and then they are valid. So, in almost all advanced directives across the country in every state, you have these four components that you're going to work on. The ones that we're not going to dive super deep into are today are going to be organ donation and body donation, and that's just like it's a really big conversation. So briefly, what I have to say about body donation is that if you want to donate your body to science, and if you think that you are going to be traveling on the road until you die, then I would be very attuned to the regulations in each and every state that you travel to, because body donation is a strict process. It is difficult to actually be eligible. There are dozens of reasons why you may not be accepted for body donation. And you also need to have a backup plan for when they don't accept your body for donation. Usually people bank on that as an opportunity for a free cremation at the end of life. thinking, and then they don't have a plan. Same thing goes for organ donation. That is a little bit easier, but there are registries for every state that you can pre-register, and it saves a lot of energy during times of stress and sadness, distress, for your agent. And presumably that person is somebody who's going to be traveling with you. So, we are going to be focusing a lot on our quality of life, which is a reflection of what matters most to you. What does living well look like? What are your cultural or religious or spiritual beliefs? You need to be able to designate your goals of care and have thoughtful communication about what kind of treatment you would want if you found yourself in a persistent vegetative state. And then also, we're going to be talking a little bit more about like CPR, artificial nutrition, and assisted breathing. Those are all the types of instructions that you would want to leave in the quality of life and goals of care section of an advanced directive. Your advanced directive is going to include a lot of different things, and some of them are just background information, food allergies, medical conditions that are not terminal or chronic, any emergency contacts that you want people to reach out to. You might include some preferences. If you are staying in certain places for lengths of time and you know about the resources that are available, you might have a particular hospital that you would rather be transported to. That, however, would be a preference because if they have determined that it is in your best interest to go to another hospital, depending on what your accident or illness is, then they have the right to override the preferences and take you somewhere else. Also, usually when your preferences are being overridden, that is because you are in an emergency situation, at which point your advance directive is not active and in effect until you've been stabilized. Some of the instructions, though, these are legally, the advanced directives are legal forms. And some of the instructions that you get to put in your advanced directive that need to be honored are going to be things like flat out refusing medication, or who is allowed to visit you and who is not allowed to visit you. Are you going to be on a ventilator or not? Are you going to have surgery or not? What these all have in common is that they are all things that have to do with your body, and the type of care that you want done to your body is a human right. The next thing you're going to do in your advanced directive is you are going to designate a healthcare agent. In other states and in various forms, this person might be referred to as a healthcare power of attorney, a surrogate, a proxy, medical power of attorney, or a decision maker. For example, in New Jersey, it is, I believe the form is called the like healthcare or the medical proxy. And then, but they also use the term healthcare agent to talk about the person. But the form that you fill out is going to be called like the proxy form or a healthcare power of attorney form. So either way, they are all the same thing. In all the states, we are designating a person. And when we designate a person, we need to think about somebody who is going to be comfortable talking to medical professionals and advocating for your preferences. They have a lot of rights in all healthcare decisions acts. There are a list of rights that are awarded to them unless you have specifically designated in your form what you don't want them to be allowed to do. That includes making sure that if your instructions are not being honored at a particular facility, that they can move you somewhere else. Your healthcare agent could be influenced by their own personal values or any family conflicts, and they might be unable to make decisions in a crisis. So we need to make sure that the person you are choosing is strong enough to follow your advanced directive and use it like a blueprint. Um, you need to make sure that they will honor your choices even if they do not agree with them. And some people might say in the beginning, oh, sure, I can do that. But it's a lot different when somebody has been hooked up to a machine And then your loved one says, okay, we need to take them off of that machine because that's not what they want. And that can be a very, very difficult decision for people to do. Um, Other aspects that compound the stress are being on the road. If you have been living a nomadic lifestyle for a very long time, and now the person that you have designated to be your healthcare agent realizes that they need to make a really difficult decision and they are all by themselves and they have no support there, they don't have people that they can call to come sit by their side or to help. The idea of saying goodbye can be difficult knowing that they are about to be all alone. And last, this person needs to accept this role. As I mentioned before, I have yet to see an advance directive, either a statutory form put out by the state or one from an estate planning lawyer that requires the healthcare agent to sign accepting their role in the advance directive. So you can pretty much just write whoever you want, and then it's up to somebody at a hospital or in a care facility to try and track that person down so they can make decisions for you. So many agents are left out of the conversation and not given any instructions or never even see this document until it's time to make major decisions with it. This information is from Virginia, obviously, but if rest assured that every state has a surrogate hierarchy. So if you do not choose your healthcare agent, the state that you become incapacitated in will choose one for you. I will say that Virginia's hierarchy is spelled out very nicely in their Healthcare Decisions Act. There are a couple of states that I've gone digging for, and it literally does not tell me. And it says, well, we usually use the list from like this other code. So it has you digging all around. And if you're not comfortable with legalese or the state code, that can become tedious when you're trying to figure it out on your own. Either way, everybody kind of starts at the top and it generally goes in the same order. So you would start with a court-appointed guardian. You would know if you had a court-appointed guardian. For a lot of groups, I'm able to say this is like a Britney Spears situation, and then other people, it does not land so well, and I have to like remember my target audience when I'm giving this presentation to others. It would then default to the spouse of the patient, except where, and then again, this is Virginia, but generally it's all the same, where divorce action has been filed and divorce is not final. So this can include a legal separation. So if you are going through a divorce and you have now left and you are on some pilgrimage across the country and you have not filed a separation and your divorce is not final, technically your spouse would have the opportunity to make your healthcare decisions for you if you became incapacitated. Then it goes to your adult children, parents of the patient, adult siblings, any other relatives in descending order of blood relationship. And then in Virginia, once you get to step 7, it is a lot of different words that boils down to any interested party. When I am giving this to a group of community members or like working on a workshop together, I use myself as the example that about 7 years ago, if I did not designate a healthcare agent in my advance directive, I would have found myself down at like probably step 6 or 7 because when I was going through my divorce, we didn't do anything officially for 3 years. We lived on opposite sides of the country from one another and just ignored that we existed. I didn't have an adult child at that time. My parents had already died in my 20s. I am an only child. Technically, my mom was adopted, so the blood relationship thing gets a little muddy. In Virginia, they would accept adopted family. However, my family is in Oregon. I'm in Virginia, and the person that would have picked up the phone is probably not the best person to make decisions for me. And then that brought me down to like step 7, any interested party. And I was like, well, I can find an interested party and write them down on a piece of paper. Why would I want to let the state that I'm in decide that for me? And the overarching use of your advance directive does seem to be the same in most states and their Healthcare Decisions Act. So, in order to activate your advance directive, the doctor or psychologist must tell you, or it must be put in writing, that they have found you to be incapacitated. There's usually a second physician or psychologist involved as well. And then and so that means that your advance directive can now be active and someone can make your decisions for you. Also, we will come back to, because another portion of this is that your advance directive goes into effect when the patient is actually stabilized, but we've got about 2 slides and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Once you have regained capacity, then you can go back to making your own decisions again. And that is something that I think a lot of people don't realize. People will think that once they've created their advance directive, that the person that they have designated to be their agent is the person who is going to forever make healthcare decisions for them. And that's not the case. And so many times you'll see an adult child swoop in out of nowhere and be like, no, mom doesn't want that, or we're going to do XYZ, or a spouse or whatever. But if that person has capacity, they're in charge of their own decisions. This, however, does differ if you are currently in DC and you create a DC advance directive. They do have an option there that you can hand over decision-making rights to your healthcare agent even though you have capacity. So you have to be really careful when you're filling that out, that you understand the rights and the powers and when you're giving them to those people. You can revoke or amend your advance directive at any time that you have capacity. So it's as easy as like tearing it up and making a new one. And then whichever one has the most recent date on it is going to be accepted. I tell people that this is not my preferred method of updating your advance directive. I think it's really important that a lot of people have copies of it so they know what you want. This should not be some hidden document that we have to search for. But it's also important to keep track of who has that document, and when you make changes to it, that everybody gets updated. And there are going to become some times where an advance directive might not be the right answer. So, like I mentioned before, an advance directive is a legal form. We are going to spend a couple of minutes talking about PULST, which is a national program, and almost every state has their own version of PULST, even if they have not subscribed to the national form. And PULST used to stand for the Physician Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. That's the national program. As we can see here, Washington calls it the Portable Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. All of this stuff means the exact same thing. And what we have with our advance directive is we have a legal form that is not able to be used when there is an emergency situation. So if you are living on the road and you were to go into cardiac arrest in the middle of the campground and you only have an advance directive, that is going to mean that they're going to call 911. And when EMS shows up, they are going to start pumping on your chest. They're going to give you CPR. They're going to break some ribs. They're going to break your sternum. You might get an infection from them puncturing a lung. You're going to end up in the ICU being intubated. You're going to have some meds. You will be incapacitated for a while. If you have any sort of frailty, so as we get older in age, things are more difficult to recuperate from. If you have one or more chronic illness, if you've got a serious illness, like a life-limiting illness, so things like congestive heart failure are life-limiting right now. Like you could live for many years with them, but eventually it will be a terminal diagnosis that is your ultimate death is caused by that illness. All of these things will affect the success rates of CPR, and they will affect if and for how long you get to leave the hospital before you have like these additional issues from the CPR that happens. So that is with an advance directive because you are in an emergency situation. The EMS that is arriving, they have their own set of standards that have been outlined for them in their state's law. They've got a medical director that they answer to, and they are going to get you stabilized. At which point, once you are stabilized at the hospital with a tube down your throat and some broken ribs, and you are in a coma, they will then turn to your healthcare agent and they will turn to, sorry, I'm going to need a drink. They're going to turn to that advanced directive and they're going to say, okay, well, what do we do next? And then it puts the responsibility into the hands of your agent to say, well, according to this document and the myriad conversations that I've had with this person over the years, this is not what they want. And this is not quality of life for them. And sorry, so sorry. I have my advanced directive filled out, by the way, so I'll be okay from all of this. At which point it's going to put that responsibility on that person to say, this is not what they want. We need to take that tube out. We need to not do CPR. It's so much easier once you have a terminal diagnosis. It's so much easier or a life-limiting illness to not do aggressive treatment if that's not what you want, rather than to force your healthcare agent to do it for you. So, advanced directives are good for everyone. Right now, being out on the road, if something were to happen, we get into a car accident, we drive off a cliff, like we lots of things can happen to us. We can be injured at any moment. A DNR is similar to a post form. However, it is good for people who only want decisions documented about DNRs, so CPRs, and that's cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Post forms, however, are good for people that are already living with a serious illness, frailty, or if they are nearing death. And it covers a lot of different topics, not only CPR, but also artificial nutrition and mechanical ventilation. A DNR only tells people what you do not want. You do not want resuscitation. A post form allows you the opportunity to choose whether you want to have aggressive treatment or limited treatment or no treatment at all and just comfort care. For all of those different things that are listed, whether it comes to CPR, artificial nutrition, or mechanical ventilation, you get to pick the level of care and for how long. And an advanced directive is giving us these broad instructions for future care. It's a really good way to document our values, beliefs, and preferences. And then, as we already discussed, advanced directives cannot be used in emergency situations, but our DNR and our post forms will be honored in emergency situations. A post form will go with you in and out of facility settings. And DNRs are going to be outlined again in the state code. And so some of them may not automatically apply out of the hospital or the facility of which they were written for. So we do have some problems with advanced directives. Some things that we will kind of notice is that out in the field when facilitators are talking, people don't want to fill them out because they have ties to euthanasia. Back in the late 60s, the first person to talk about living wills and to promote the idea of an advance directive was a gentleman who was giving a presentation at a euthanasia conference. And just like a lot of people still think that hospice is only for cancer patients, now a lot of people are like, oh, doesn't that mean that I'm giving up hope or that I don't want any care if I create an advance directive? When in actuality, it is empowering people to be in charge of the care that they want and the care that they don't want. We have some racism and bias. Some people are afraid to work with facilitators or to work with their clinicians to create these documents when we think of like historical situations where people have abused others, like the Tuskegee syphilis study. They think that and it's there's a long system of paternalistic care that we've had to kind of fight our way out of, and just like the doctors telling us to trust them and that they know what's right for us and that we're going to fill out this form and we're going to do this study and everything's going to be okay. It was not historically around patient-centered care, and sometimes it was racist, sometimes it was misleading, sometimes it was um, offering us aggressive or forcing us into aggressive treatment that did not allow us to be informed about what our options were. A lack of support and a lack of access are kind of, those are things that we're going to see out on the road. If we don't have someone to be our agent, if we don't know what options are available to us, if we are spending a different every month in a new state, that can seem overwhelming, because I would suggest that people have at least a comfortable understanding of what the Healthcare Decisions Act says in every state to at least determine if you might want to have more than one. Generally speaking, they are going to try and follow the advance directive that you created in another state, unless there is something that is just either not legal in the particular state that you're in, or maybe there are things that they do want documented that you haven't covered because the state that you got yours done in doesn't recognize those statutes. Um, they can be confusing and intimidating. I will agree. Like, even with other facilitators, we have different ways of doing things, and some people want to lump it all into one giant document. Others have these addendums and these provisions that they will add in. So it can be very confusing. I can guarantee that the advance directive that you do with a facilitator looks nothing like the advance directive that you do with an estate planning lawyer. Those are really great legal forms, and they tell the agent what they can do, but they don't tell the agent how to do it. Um, And we have some unresolved myths and personal and cultural values. So some people don't think that they need to make one, or because their culture tells them like we're going with aggressive treatment all the way till the very end. So what's the point of having an advance directive if I don't make one, I'm always going to get the treatment. And then some people don't understand how to create them, or they think that they're giving up any sort of power by creating one. So that's a myth that we often find out in the community. Once you have created your advance directive, it's really important to take a look at it throughout the lifespan, especially when we're on the road. So when your domicile changes, you should take a look at your advance directive. Find out, is it going to be legal in another state? If it is, then great. If not, then you can fill one out for that state. You might have like a nice little stack of them that just live in the RV with you. If you or someone you know has a new diagnosis or decline, that's a great time to think about our care. If you know someone who has died recently, that's a great time to think about your own death and what that's going to look like if you become incapacitated, you are in a persistent vegetative state, and then you need someone to make decisions for you. If you get a divorce, you want to make sure that you have picked, if you've used your spouse as your healthcare agent, then you need to pick someone else to be your healthcare agent. Not all states will automatically remove your spouse after a divorce. Um, but if they have it outlined, like in the step that if you've started the divorce process, then they'll skip them over. That is if you don't have an agent. If you named your spouse specifically as your agent in your advance directive and you get a divorce, it will not automatically remove them. And then I put date in there. So like pick a date and look at it, right? I tell people if we're doing our taxes every year, then we can look in our advanced directive and take 5 minutes to see if our values are still the same. If they are not, then it takes a little, a quick second to update a sentence or two. If we don't look at it for 5 or 10 years, all of a sudden we now have to do this. And mine's a 27-page document. We have to do this 27-page document all over again because we didn't take the time to look at it. Um, A document is not enough to ensure that your wishes are followed. It is important to discuss your plan and your wishes with your healthcare provider, family, and healthcare agent. Even if you don't choose biological family members to be your healthcare agent, it is important for you to share a copy of this plan to everyone who loves you or might have an interest in your healthcare so that everyone knows the decisions that you've made and why you've made them to help mitigate any arguments or frustration they might have later in life. And with that, I would like to thank you all for sticking it out if you did. If not, you can catch it on the recording. And I am at summitcarepartners.com. And if you have any questions, you can email me. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Crystal. So good. I think that we all think we know this stuff. I mean, we know we need to do it. I think we think we know what needs to be done or decided, but you reminded me of some things that that I just kind of forgot about that are reasons why you need to do this. And I wanted to just quick share a story, and then I have a couple questions. Um, I had a situation where my parent became seriously ill very quickly, did not have an advance directive. Um, we sat down after she got to a place where we could. We sat down and filled it all out. And then it wasn't a month later that she passed.
Mm.
And I just want to say how comforting, because grief is hard, right? Grief is hard. And so, how comforting it was to have had those discussions. So, I knew not only, um, about the DNR and how to make some of those medical decisions in the ICU, but also what kind of burial she wanted, who she
Mhm.
wanted there, how she wanted that to all unfold and happen. And it all went smoothly and beautifully because we had discussed it, we had put it down, we had the form to go through and make sure we addressed all of the things. So I don't think we realize how important this is or how much of a gift it is for the people who love you to go
Mhm.
through this process, because it's really not for us, most likely. It's really going
Right.
to be for the people around you that love you and care about you, um, to make their decisions easier.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you for sharing,
yeah.
Kimberly.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so the three forms that you talked about, the Advanced Care Directive, the DNR, the POST, and you probably mentioned it and I didn't note it down, but how do you get those forms? Where do you get those
Yeah.
forms?
So great question. The DNR and your pulse you would have to get from a doctor. So that is
Okay.
also another barrier to people who are living full time on the road. Just because my nomadic lifestyle is kind of like this RV life hybrid where we still have like a base camp that we're coming back to do our clinical care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to take the establishment, and establishment doesn't mean you have to go to somebody for a really long time, right? Like I've had some clients who wanted a post form once their advance directive no longer served them,
Mm-hmm.
and they went to their doctor. Their doctor said, well, you don't have anything wrong with you and you're like spry and 70 and like bouncing around traveling. And they're like, I'm also 70 and I don't want to, they're going to crack my ribs open. If my heart stops at 70, my heart stops. They
Hmm.
refused to give them the pulse form. So they went and found a new doctor. And that new doctor on the very first visit signed the pulse form for them and had a conversation
Okay.
about it. So you would need to go to a clinician for the DNR and the pulse form.
Okay.
An advanced directive, I mean, this is probably not good for my business, but you could go grab a piece of paper right now and sit with your your current state's Healthcare Decisions Act in front of you and start penciling out what you want and make sure you're just following the law and write it on notebook paper and get two adult witnesses to sign it.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of effort. I like a form that spells it
Yeah,
all out
yes.
for me.
Yes. So if you're looking for a form, there are options. It depends on the state that you're in. Some states will have a very specific form, and then you can Google search your state's form, Pennsylvania Advanced Directive. What I
Hmm.
will say is that if you go to, and I'll put it in the chat for you, if you go to caringinfo.org, this is a program of the National Alliance for Care at Home, which for anybody who knows or cares used to be NHPCO, which was the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. They, at that website right there,
Hmm.
caringinfo.org, they have a section called What Do You Need to Do to Create an Advance Directive? And then you can scroll down and you can see like an individual state's advance directives. You can pick a state. We'll pick Arkansas, and then it gives you the options to download an advance directive in English and in Spanish.
Okay.
Um, so that is an option. Doing it
Hmm.
all on your own is an option. There are also resources like the Conversation Project. So the form is one thing, but knowing what to do with the form is another thing. And
Hmm.
also, not all forms are created equal. And so a lot of your forms are going to designate the healthcare agent, and then they're going to pencil out all of the rights of that healthcare agent. They're going to ask you if you want to donate your organs or your body. They're going to talk about like these very end of life situations. So, like, are you going to want care if you're in a persistent vegetative state?
Hmm.
And that is kind of it for most of these forms. What they're not going to do is they are not going to talk about open-ended, guided values questions about the not only like what your life looks like right now. There's like a lot of time for most of us, hopefully, there's like a lot of time between right now and taking our last breath. And there's a lot of nuance in the ways that we're all going to die. And some of us are already living with chronic illness that is going to not necessarily look the exact same. Like my heart disease and your heart disease are going to be different, but there's a certain trajectory that is that everyone's going to kind of go through at some point. Trained facilitators, nurses, advanced care planning teams that are in hospital settings, we've all been trained on the trajectories of the main admitting diagnoses for hospice. And so we're
Hmm.
able to kind of have deeper conversations about real scenarios that are going to happen way before do you want CPR or
Oh,
not because they're in a
CPR.
persistent vegetative state. So you can go to
Gotcha.
a facilitator, you can go to an estate planning lawyer, you can go to caringinfo.org, and there's a lot of different options.
Okay. We do have a question from one of our audience members, and that is, and I think we've already done this, but let's just succinctly summarize it one more time. Can you recap on what the first step I should do if I do not have a current advance directive and have moved to a different state?
Absolutely. The first step would be, well, okay, so for me, the first step is deciding how you want to do your advanced directive. Like the first step is you need to go get a new advanced directive. And then I do agree that there are people out there, like I like to make sure that people have the opportunity to have an entry at whatever level is most comfortable for them. So the free option would be to go to caringinfo.org and print off the advance directive for your state. Maybe go to the Conversation Project, and then download. They have free conversation guides that will help you kind of like do a deeper dive into your values and picking a healthcare agent, how to be a healthcare agent. So you can go grab those two things for free, and then you would want to fill it out. Once it's filled out, you would want to make sure that your loved ones have it, that you have a copy backed up in a couple of places, that your healthcare agent has a copy, the local hospital or a doctor has a copy. You can also see if your state's registry, if you have a state registry. If you have a state registry, you can upload an advance directive to there. And this is where things get kind of weird. There is a state registry, there is a national registry, and then there is this really like it's kind of living in the ether. It's called My Directives. And
Mhm.
it will not, it's a place where you can start to upload all of your documents, and it's good as long as people know that they're there. With the Virginia registry, you still have to tell them that you have your advance directive uploaded in this place, but any provider can go pull it from that registry. Whereas if you use My Directives, you have to have a card with a little QR code on it that then they could scan and pull the information from there. It doesn't
Gotcha.
like allow you to. Other options, if you don't want the free option, if it seems overwhelming, if you hop around to a lot of different states, this is where I would suggest a facilitator. My hope is that the facilitator you're working with knows or is comfortable with figuring out the law in each state that you go to, and
Mhm.
making sure that they have like curated a form that will tick all of the boxes in all of the states that you go to. So you could work with a facilitator. And then the third option is like if you really want to just have like a super legal form, but you don't want like the depth of the conversation
Mhm.
about your values, then you could go to an estate planning lawyer.
Okay, okay. So there's lots of different places. And I know that like every time I stop by the hospital, they have them usually available
Hmm.
there too. They're always asking, "Do you have one? Do you need one?" And I think in our case with my parent, we had to give it to their doctor, so they had
Hmm.
their primary care had a copy, the hospital had a copy. So, good stuff.
Yeah. The
Let's
only
see.
thing that I do recommend for people is that like, and it's nothing to like, it is nothing against if we have any estate planning lawyers that are watching this. I love the work you do. I'm not talking badly. But it's really important that if you're going to use a legal statutory form, like something that basically just says, here is the law and here's the person you've designated, that you do use supplementary workbooks, whether it's the Conversation Project, Compassionate Choices also has an end of life decisions toolkit.
Okay.
And that alone is kind of like that one and done, where they ask a lot of values based questions, and the way that you sign it and you have the witnesses sign it, that creates a valid advance directive in many states. So for me, it's if you're going to use one from a lawyer, or if you're going to use a statutory form that basically just outlines the powers that are being given, that you supplement it with something where you are documenting your values and like personal instructions, things that you can write down in your own words. That's going to be the part that matters most to your healthcare agent.
Okay. Great. So much good information, and I can see why you would want to have a deep dive conversation with somebody who knows the ins and outs of this. Your contact information is on the website on your speaker
Mhm.
page. So you can go to anchoredinfreedomsummit.com, look for Crystal's section, and then click on speaker info, and you'll get all her contact info and figure out how to ask more questions. Because I have
Absolutely. It
more, but we're
usually,
running out of time. So,
right?
so
Thank
this
you
has
so
been
much,
really
Kimberly.
thank you so much. And I hope that folks really take to heart what you had to share today because I think it's important.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the rest of the summit, and we're on to John next.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And
I'll see you
he's
guys
waiting in the
later.
wings, so we'll get him in here in just a sec. All right, Crystal. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks again. Oh, wow. That was good. That's a little bit heavy for a th well, that's why we're doing it on Thursday. We're not going to get you in the mud on a Friday, right? But really important information. I think that everyone needs to take it to heart and look into what it is that you can do to ease the process for yourself and for your loved ones.